Hi, and welcome to today's episode of The Supporting Actor. I'm your host, Adrian Streeter, so let's jump right into it. Hello, and thank you for joining the Supporting Actor podcast. My name is Adrian Streeter, your host, and we have a phenomenal show today. I am welcomed by Malcolm and Jordan Glenn, who, during their pregnancy of their first son, discovered something that was life-changing. So let's welcome the Glenns to our podcast. Good morning, Malcolm. Good morning, Jordan.
Morning.
Good
How are
morning.
you all doing?
Great. How are you?
Again, I'm still here in Louisiana in this hot heat, and they closed our swimming pool. So my kids are running up a wall. I hope it's much better for you where you're located.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Well, it's still hot, but no complaints.
Cool beans. Well, let's jump right in. Thank you both so much for joining the podcast and sharing not only your story and journey and your experiences, but ultimately your resources that you all have learned through your experience. So, you all have a son. His name is Oliver. Tell us a little bit about Oliver.
Do you want to go first?
You can go.
Okay. Oliver is 3 years old, and he is the most sweet, loving little boy who is also rambunctious and full of life, seemingly only runs out of energy as soon as you force him to go to bed, and loves all things vehicles, any sort of vehicle, rescue vehicle, construction vehicle, you name it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Malcolm.
And he's also loving being a big brother to his little sister Josie. So he's taken on that role quite well.
Well, and we'll talk about that a little later on, but that's really cool that he's loving that role. Our oldest, I'm not going to say she loved the role, but but there are moments where it's enjoyable, definitely having two kids.
Yes.
So now Oliver was born with a specific heart condition. Can you tell us how you all learned about his heart condition? Was it before he was born? Was it after? When did you and how did you learn about that?
Yeah, we went in for, we had gone to several ultrasounds, obviously, beforehand, because I didn't find out until I was 22 weeks along throughout the pregnancy. And Malcolm was like, hey, do you want to take your mom maybe to this ultrasound? Because we've seen a lot. I'll see the pictures whenever you get them. And he knew that my mom really wanted to come with me and see for herself. So we just had a routine anatomy. The first anatomy scan, they didn't get really great photos of Oliver's heart or his arms because he was kind of squashed. Mm-hmm. And so it was really hard for them. He was very uncooperative throughout almost every ultrasound, actually. And when we went back in for the second one, the ultrasound tech spent some time really trying to get me up and moving, trying to make sure that they could try and get some additional angles. And at the end of it, almost like an hour's worth of time,
wow,
she's just said, hey, we didn't really get the best photos, but we want to give them to the doctor and see what she says. And I just honestly thought that he was uncooperative again. And so my mom and I were waiting, and the doctor came in and she just said, hey, we think we want to send you to maternal fetal medicine doctor. They have a better machine to take better photos of the heart and the arms. And we really want to make sure that everything looks good. So we're going to send you over there. I thought, again, sounds great. We walked out, we went to the checkout, and my mom and I were waiting to, make sure that insurance and pay the copay and all that. And the doctor came back, my doctor came back out, my OB, and she said, hey, they actually can see you now. And I thought, okay, something's off. That's whenever I knew something was off. There's no way in any sort of medical appointment that you're oh, you're referred to someone else. You can see them now.
Right.
Unless
right.
is wrong. So we went across the street and we got in right away. We had another ultrasound on a much fancier ultrasound machine. And then we went and saw the maternal fetal medicine doctor. And at that point in time, he said, I want to let you know that we think that your baby has a congenital heart defect. And that heart defect, we think, is tricuspid atresia based on the images. Although he admitted to the MFM that Oliver still was not very cooperative. So it wasn't 100% positive that that would be the congenital heart defect, but that he wanted to refer us to MUSC to get additional imaging and try and see if they could figure out what the congenital heart defect really was, and that it would perhaps be worth a second opinion too, just to kind of see. But that it was great that we had caught it and that we could develop some sort of plan throughout the rest of my pregnancy. That's how we found out.
So you went to MUSC,
Yep.
which is the Medical University of South Carolina. Did your journey stop there?
No. We went to MUSC and we met with the team. The team was wonderful. They brought us in. We had another ultrasound. And then they brought us into a conference room and told us that that's whenever they had actually told us that they thought that he had pulmonary atresia with intact ventricular septum and that potentially some tricuspid atresia, but they weren't 100% positive. Obviously, very difficult the fact that they can even see all of that in the ultrasound imaging is incredible. So they were trying to come up with a couple of different plans. My mom came with us. Your mom came with us. We kind of had just a couple of additional opinions, just trying to absorb all the terminology. Neither of us are in the medical profession. So just trying to get as many listening ears, because sometimes I felt like I was in shock in some of these conversations that I wasn't necessarily absorbing everything. So having some of those support family members there in that conversation was really helpful. They gave us a couple of different options. They walked through what a typical path would be for a child with pulmonary atresia with intact ventricular septum. And then we left there and
it felt okay about the appointment, but I would note when Jordan saw her MFM, she asked, if this was your son or grandson, where would you go to the doctor? And he said, we have a great hospital facility, MUSC, right here in our backyard. But he said I would also go up to the Northeast, and he specifically referenced Boston Children's Hospital, which is ultimately where we got a second opinion and decided to have Oliver's care up at Boston Children's.
Yeah.
I I can relate to wanting to take your child out of the state for additional opinions. When it comes to your child, you are their biggest advocate. You want to make sure that the medical information that you are receiving is accurate and it's the best decision. So, with that being said, obviously there's been some travel back and forth between where you all are located now, and it sounds like Boston. What would you say has been the most challenging part of not necessarily raising, but I will say raising a child with a heart condition? I know for us, we struggled a lot with insurance and physical therapy and how many physical therapy appointments we could take. What has been some of the most challenging aspects after Oliver was born? Has it been? And yeah, if you could talk to that, that would be great.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I think from raising him, I think it's a lot more of like how to not protect him as much, as awful as that sounds. He was born April 2020, COVID. We were in and out of the hospital for the first few months of his life. He had a cardiac arrest during that time, had his first open heart surgery. And we, amidst this pandemic, we didn't really have a lot of visitors. We weren't allowed to have visitors at the hospital. It was just us. It was just the medical team. And I feel like that part of the journey was almost easy-ish in a way, because we didn't have to worry about people or too many germs. Like everything was pretty, and he was just so little at the time too. He couldn't really do anything. I think the challenges kind of became when we came home, allowing him to just grow like a normal child. I think sometimes I was the helicopter parent in a way, and I'm sure you could speak to kind of your thoughts too, but I felt like I was constantly trying to make sure that he didn't fall. How was he doing things, making sure that he ate really well, no real junk food. Like there's, you have this heart condition and trying to make sure that you're as healthy as possible while also still trying to make sure that he was doing things a normal child could. So I think that there was trying to find that balance. No one gives you, even with a healthy child, no one gives you a handbook and says, hey, this is how you parent and this is how you raise a good child. So trying to find that in my first child was, I think, interesting. And it has been the most challenging part, is more so keeping myself in check, like letting him just be. And he has no idea, this is his normal.
Yes.
And so everything that he is doing in the day is, he doesn't know anything else.
Yes.
So just trying to remember that and keep that at the forefront, I think has been the hardest challenge for me.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And, early on when we came home from the hospital, when he was a month, 2-3 months old, we would have regular weekly check-ins with the hospital in Boston. And it wasn't so much a challenge, it's just an added aspect of having a newborn. And he was on, at the time, 4 to 5 different medicines that he had to get throughout the day. He slept with a little monitor on his foot that would kind of measure his vitals as he slept. So there was always, it would always fall off of his foot and it would beep at 2:00 in the morning. And we'd be like, oh my gosh, what's going on? When, it was all okay. But, just those were some nuanced aspects, I guess, if you will, of having Oliver in the condition that he had, and being new parents, and kind of working through that. So
yeah, I actually think I kind of forgot about that part of life. I think I just, I guess there's just in the past and so far back in my memory, but you're right. Like, I definitely remember thinking at that 2 a.m. wake up call, being like, oh gosh, like I hear the beeping in the monitor. Is he still breathing? Did he have another cardiac arrest, or did it simply fall off of his foot? And we just need to wrap the oximeter back on his foot. Also trying, we try to follow this scheduling thing as a newborn as well, to try and make sure that he slept well and he ate on time so that we could try and get a little bit of sleep and those kinds of things. And it was really hard whenever you're trying to slip a medicine in at 11 p.m. at night or 2 a.m. in the morning, because they're on all these schedules, and trying not to wake up a newborn child. But we had to do that. So there's a lot of that I actually forgot.
Well, for me, I'm listening to your journey, and if you don't know about me, I cry at the drop of a dime. So I have my tissue here. So if you see me start crying, because I know parenting for a newborn is hard in and of itself, but the added challenges that you and Malcolm went through, there's a saying that God won't put more on you than you can handle. And so my heart just is so full for listening to your journey. Let's take a step back. And this question, it can start with Malcolm. Let's talk about when the day Oliver was born. What happened as soon as he was born? And I'm asking you specifically because if Jordan is anything like me, she was busy doing other things. and Malcolm was probably right there with Oliver once he was born. Take us back to that moment and tell us what happened as soon as Oliver was born. And was he born in South Carolina? Or if I remember correctly, I believe you said he was born in Boston.
That's right. Yeah, he was born in Boston. So we went up 2 weeks before he was born. And so we were in the hospital, and he was born at 4:00 in the morning, right on the dot. And I think there were maybe 2 nurses in our room leading up to, when it was time to start pushing. And So it was time to start pushing, and all of a sudden, I think there were 12 nurses and doctors in the room. They all came in, right at the right as he was about to be born. And so Oliver made his appearance, and Jordan got to hold him for about a minute or so, and then he was placed into another little incubator there in the room while the nurses and doctors got him hooked up, and he needed medicine as soon as he was born to allow him to continue breathing, essentially. And so he was in the incubator, and they got him hooked up and weighed and measured and all the statistics they do for the newborns. And then Oliver and I made a trip from Brigham and Women's Hospital, which is where he was born, to Boston Children's, and they actually have a sky bridge that connects the two hospitals. So Oliver and I went over to Boston Children's to the cardiac ICU, where he would be for about a month after he was born. And so I know it was much harder for Jordan in that she only was able to have him for a few minutes before we left the room. And then I think it was probably just Jordan and the nurse there, just like that. So it was very quick and somewhat chaotic, but everyone did what they had to do to care for Oliver in that moment.
And how soon after he was born did he have his first surgery?
He didn't have his first surgery until June, but they did do a cath lab procedure to open up. Oh gosh, no,
the valve. They opened up his pulmonary valve. Yeah. So he had a few cath lab procedures, which is where they use a catheter to go up through his groin and into his heart. It's invasive, but not as invasive as open heart surgery, and they can still do some diagnostic testing and some things like that. So I think he had 3 cath lab procedures that first month of life for him. But then he didn't have his first open heart surgery until he was 2 months old.
But that first cath lab procedure was the day of his birth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It was like 12 hours later they took him to the cath lab.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
at what moment, Jordan, were you reunited with Oliver after you actually gave birth?
I had 90 seconds with him. We took a family photo, and then they whisked him away, and I saw him after his first cath lab procedure. Okay. So it was maybe 10 p.m. that night that we rolled back over.
I think so.
Yeah.
So it was a while, from 4 a.m. to about 10 p.m. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a long time. So now you all have a second child, correct?
Yes.
All right. What precautionaries, if any, did your doctors take with your second pregnancy because of Oliver's heart condition?
Yeah. I think first we had a genetic study done at Boston Children's because Oliver was not reacting the way that the textbook says that he should whenever they were doing certain things. So we had a really robust whole exome sequencing genetic study done. So that took some of my blood for a study, some of Malcolm's blood for a study, and some of Oliver's blood for a study, really looking for any sort of genetic, I don't know.
Genetic connections to, they have a huge national database. And so they're able to see, are there any links between.
And so we took that study. They didn't find anything that linked genetically. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we took that genetic study and went back to the MFM in Charleston, who originally said that we had a child with a congenital heart defect, and did a conference with him to just kind of go over like where are odds, kind of. We know that you can't tell us, if this is going to happen again or not, but if you felt like it would happen again, we would maybe talk about what our options would be in regards to maybe having another child, knowing that there could be that risk. However, during that conference, they were really positive, and based on the genetic study that we had done, they really felt like it was just an anomaly.
Mhm.
And
Which a lot of them are, but
yeah, so we, that was that. And then he also had told me that, if we did want to try again and have another child, that it would just be very monitored. We would see the MFM from like day one of knowing that we were pregnant, and that they would monitor us as I would be high risk pregnancy from having a child like Oliver first, which is exactly what happened.
So I think if I remember correctly in our pre-production meeting, there was a silver lining to the genetic testing. Can you talk about that for our audience?
Yeah. So with the genetic testing, Malcolm and myself were able to, and for Oliver, select a checkbox that said, would you want to know if there were like any sort of secondary findings in your blood work for a genetic mutation? And we said, why not? I guess we're already at this point in time, like might as well just check boxes and see. And I guess three things really came back. One, both Malcolm and myself have different genetic mutations that are sometimes linked to cardiomyopathy. And with that, they recommended that we both had echocardiograms done as well. We did that, and our hearts are good, thank God. And the other piece of the study piece of the genetic testing that we found out was that I am BRCA1 positive, which means I'm high risk for breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and mainly just female reproductive cancers. And that Oliver also has the BRCA1 gene. So, while some perhaps would see that as, oh gosh, I can't believe you guys have something else, I also do really think that it's a blessing that we were able to find out that we do have this, as I've been able to go and have all sorts of kind of baseline imaging done on myself. That way, if something were to arise, that they would be able to detect it. I go every 6 months for some sort of imaging or testing just to make sure that all is well. And that we know Oliver would also have some testing done eventually just to make sure that he doesn't develop a reproductive cancer, or males having breast cancer or something like that as well later down the road.
My husband, in a weird way, when I was 4 months pregnant and we were living in New York, I got sick at work, and I came home, and my commute was like an hour and a half, and I came home early, and my husband was having a heart attack, and he was 38 years old, and our toddler at the time was still strapped into her car seat. And so he has learned since that he has a very rare heart disease that only 4% of people in North America has. And so we are very familiar with having to go to the doctor. And once um, they determined that it was a genetic disease that he had, our daughters have to see a cardiologist every 3 to 5 years to make sure that they are not developing the condition that he was born with and just didn't know. So, very familiar with having to deal with a heart condition. With that being said, I've gotten very supportive of different foundations. What foundation or organization our audience can support to support Oliver and other children who may be in Oliver's condition or something similar that you all may really be passionate about?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I think there are so many organizations that support children like Oliver who have congenital heart defects, and the studies that go into trying to make a lot of advancements in treatments. Really, a lot of what was done for Oliver was kind of experimental in a way. There, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. There's those tried kind of the textbook treatment route, but that was one of the reasons ultimately that we chose Boston is they were trying some new ways of mitigating the effects of congenital heart defect that Oliver had. So
I would say those organizations would be any sort of like hospital foundation, Boston Children's, MUSC, both have supported us really well with very caring and knowledgeable arms. And I would also say American Heart Association. We've done all the walks and supported them throughout different functions. And they, of course, have a research arm as well. I'd also say any sort of organization that also supports families to deal with the trauma or educating parents on what it's going to be like, or hospital stays even.
Yeah,
like
I was going to say Ronald McDonald House.
Ronald McDonald houses.
That was a huge thing, kind of just quickly going to the challenges. We chose Boston, which is about a 2.5 hour flight from Charleston, but traveling and lodging, organizations that can help families find lodging should they choose to seek care outside of their state was a really big thing for us. And our first time in Boston, the hospital housing department really stepped in and helped us find a furnished apartment that we were ultimately there for 6 weeks. So that would be is a great resource for families.
Yeah, just some of those cost burdens that you're already going to meet your max deductible, max out of pocket with something like this. So what are some of the additional funding sources that you can get as you navigate those challenges, whether it's any sort of meal providing services, housing, lodging, all of that? Yeah.
That's great. So in addition to the Ronald McDonald House, and we'll, if there's a link available, we'll add that to the description so that parents who may be looking for some type of housing, if they are traveling, they can at least contact the Ronald McDonald House. Are there any other resources if a parent or a group or parents find themselves in a similar situation? Are there any resources that would just come to the top of your mind that you think you would like to share with our audience that would be beneficial to them?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I spoke to other parents about just tips and tricks of, what are some things that we could do to help understand what we're going through? How, even though everyone's experience is different, these people have lived what you're living through in some capacity. And I think that was really helpful to just be vulnerable and open yourself up. I know I was a little bit reluctant to do that in the first. I wanted to handle everything myself. So I think reaching out to other families there, I know a congenital heart defect is 1 in 100, but there are a lot of kids and a lot of families with a congenital heart defect. And I actually think it's one of the leading causes of death in youth, more so over than cancer for kids.
Yeah.
So it's
heart disease.
Yeah, heart disease.
That's what it is. It's heart disease.
And so I would just reach out to families. I know that I connected with some families over LinkedIn. I know that Boston Children's had a resource for us. It's like a Facebook support group for families. That was something that was really helpful and something that I still take a look at to provide help to other families.
Yeah, I think and that was great. Starting with something like the American Heart Association, which is a huge national organization for children and adults who have forms of heart disease. That's a great place to start. I know for us, we had a great hospital in our backyard of MUSC and had that opinion, but we also did a lot of research. I say we, my wife did a lot of research on our own to try and inform and shape our decision that we were going to make. And so any of those organizations have so much information readily available that can take you, to where you need to go.
Yeah, a lot of research, but going to these organizations that are truly dedicated to causes like this, and learn CPR. whether it be, we were very fortunate to, in a way, to have Oliver have a cardiac arrest in the hospital. And so, but they performed CPR for 45 minutes on him. And had that have happened at home, I'm not sure if we would have had the same result. And same thing for, your husband, just learning CPR is life-saving. So get educated on, try and find as many different resources as you can through really reputable organizations and hospitals. The hospitals have great
care teams.
Yeah, care teams that support you, and they have tons of resources. So simply just asking for more, sometimes we get down this Google hole, and it's not a fun spot to be in, and oftentimes doesn't always give you the most accurate information. So really going to trusted nonprofits and hospital foundations, and then just kind of rounding it out and triangulating all of those things with parents, and trying to help understand what you're going to potentially go through, and have people that are going to be there for you to support you in whatever happens throughout your journey.
Well, this has been awesome. I thank both of you for your vulnerability. You talked about, being vulnerable and being that resource to other parents, and those parents being resources to you. And that's exactly what this platform is designed for. It's designed to create information, provide resources, and create a space for parents who may have a child that was born with a specific condition and or developed one later on. And so I just want to thank both you, Jordan, and Malcolm, for coming on and sharing Oliver's story and his journey. How's Oliver now? Like, how is he? How's his appointment? How are
Yeah, he's great. He's just turned 3 in April. If he has a shirt on and you didn't see his scar from his chest, you would never know that he has the heart condition that he does. But he's doing great, and I think so. This coming November, in a few months, will be 1 year post-op from his second open heart surgery. And so we've gone throughout the years of seeing a cardiologist here locally at MUSC every 3 months. Now I think it's every 6 months, and then ultimately we'll move to once a year, assuming everything continues to go well.
Well, thank you both so much. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about Oliver's lifelong journey for a very long time. So, Jordan and Malcolm, thank you so much again for sharing your story, not only with me, but with our audience. We truly appreciate it. And if there are any other parents that are out there that would like to learn more about Oliver's condition, definitely feel free to leave a comment. And if I can't answer it, or if Jordan can't answer it and Malcolm can't answer it, we'll make sure that you get the answer that you need from a reputable source. So thank you both again, and we appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye. Well, thank you so much for joining this episode of The Supporting Actor. We just had a really great conversation with Malcolm and Jordan and learned a lot about their son, Oliver. So if you are a parent who are dealing with or supporting a child with a heart disease, feel free to check the link below for all of the resources that we will be providing. Or if you know anyone, share this video. Well, we thank you all for your time, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode of The Supporting Actor. Take care.